Fake populist Josh Hawley had some things to say about the Biden administration. Let's see what he had to say.
He ran talking about unity, but so far he has governed as a radical leftist partisan. He hasn't even attempted to work with Republicans. I mean, you look at what they've done. They've jammed through their priorities, their legislative priorities, using rules so they don't have to get 60 votes. They're not trying to work across the aisle on any issue of any substance. So he's making the choice. You know, what's he doing meanwhile with his executive orders? Canceling energy jobs, canceling women's sports. I mean, it's radical leftist stuff. Second Amendment, incursions on Second Amendment rights. So if he wants to pursue bipartisanship, I think you'd find a lot of people who are willing to work with him if it's good for the country. But so far, again, it's been all left-wing politics all the time.
Okay, hopefully you've had enough time to watch that dribble. Firstly, let me start off by saying these are the people that should be receiving the Academy Awards for Best Actor and Best Actress, and the Golden Globe Awards for Best Actor and Best Actress, because this was quite a performance, wasn't it? I mean, Jesus Christ. Wow. I mean, these politicians, they know how to lie and do the whole theatrics like no other. You know, I've never seen anything like it ever since I really got into politics. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous, but let's not dwell on that for too long. So he says that Joe Biden and his administration, well, firstly, he says that Joe Biden has emerged, I guess, as this radical leftist partisan, you know, and they're trying to jam through the radical leftist agenda. That's what he's saying. Now, I don't need to dwell on that for too long. If you were to ask the actual people on the ground and ask actual leftists, actual progressives, if that has been the course of action of the Biden administration thus far, they would give you an entirely different story, because it's not true whatsoever. There has been no radical leftist legislation that has been passed thus far. None at all. None. And I'll get into that in this video. But before I get into that, let me just give you a quick rundown of who this guy Josh Hawley is, okay? Because you might not know. Now, this guy is a populist. That's what people call him. I'm not sure if he refers to himself as that. I'm pretty sure he has. But this is supposed to be the right saving grace right here. This guy, this populist Republican Josh Hawley. Now, there are no populist Republicans in Washington. Now, as for voters, yes, I'm sure there are. But in Washington, there are zero, a goose egg. So let me tell you what he supports and what he doesn't support. Now, this isn't his entire, set of ideas or anything like that. I just picked out the ones that I wanted to highlight that I thought were the most important. So he's a populist. Keep that in mind, okay? He doesn't support a $15 minimum wage. Wow, something that would overwhelmingly help workers in this country. Because the minimum wage right now isn't even a living wage. The $15 minimum wage isn't even a living wage anymore in most places here in this country. Now, in some places it might be, but in most places it's not. He doesn't support that. I don't know what he supports. I don't even know if he supports an increase to the minimum wage at all. Don't know. So he's anti-raising the minimum wage. We got that. He supports right-to-work laws. If you don't know what right-to-work laws are, I'll sum it up real quick for you. They're anti-worker, anti-union. Okay, according to a study by the Economic Policy Institute, the EPI, wages for a typical full-time worker in right-to-work states are 3.1% lower, or $1,558 annually, than those in non-right-to-work states. So he's anti-higher wages, anti-union, anti-worker. He also doesn't support the PRO Act, which would overwhelmingly help workers immensely by bolstering the power of unions and what have you, and many different provisions to help workers in this country. So he's supposed to be a populist. He's anti-worker, he's anti-higher wages for workers, and he's anti-union. Now let's pivot for a second and get into foreign policy. So CNN published an article which talked about how he espoused support for the Iraq war back in 2005. I think it was on like a blog post or something. He said, and I'm not going to quote because this isn't the correct quote. I might, fumble it a bit, but he said something to this effect. He posed this question. The question should not be how are we going to leave, but how are we going to win? Referring to the Iraq war. He said this in 2005, so we've already been in that war for a while. You might say, oh, well, that was a long time ago. Oh, okay, well, in 2017, he accepted an endorsement from John Bolton. John Bolton, undeniable war criminal, should be in jail, should be in The Hague, accepted an endorsement from John Bolton, lied us into the Iraq War, one of the biggest, if not the biggest Iraq War supporter, John Bolton, should be in prison, okay, for the rest of his life, John Bolton. He supported the ending of the Iran deal. So he's a war hawk, just to sum it up. I don't need to go any further, okay? Now, to get back to this video, now that you know who he is and what he supports, okay? He's no populist. He's a neocon war hawk. He's anti-worker, anti-union. We got all that. Cool. He says that, and this is where it gets absolutely comical. He just goes on this rant of shit that makes no sense. He says that Joe Biden ran on unity and now he's not unifying. First of all, the people that are clinging to this unity argument, this is the argument of a side that's losing. Okay? Legislation is getting passed that they're not in support of, and now they're trotting back to the old, but you said you were going to unify us and you were going to govern as a moderate. Well, he is. Well, he is. This radical left legislation. You know, Joe Biden canceled student loan debt. Did you guys know that? He did. Guess how much he canceled? $1 billion worth of student loan debt. Guess how much student loan debt we have in this country? I think we're trickling on $2 trillion. $2 trillion. If it's not there, it's almost there. But he canceled $1 billion. You know that's less than 1% of the total amount of student loan debt? Wow, so radical, so progressive. Is he a communist? That's absolutely astounding. Less than 1% of student loan debt. The $1,400 checks that everybody got, that they say was a huge spending bill. Progressive wanted it to be $2,000 checks, and they wanted it to be reoccurring. Radical left agenda, I know. The $15 minimum wage that we wanted, didn't get it. And we'll get to that a little bit more in a second, but to raise the federal minimum wage, leftists wanted that. Didn't get it. Radical leftist agenda, though, I know. Let's continue. So he says that Biden's executive orders, he's been passing a lot of radical legislation through his executive orders. Well, in a recent executive order, Joe Biden raised the minimum wage for federal contractors to $15. For all federal contractors, he raised the minimum wage to $15. The Liberal Economic Policy Institute estimates that as many as 390,000 low-wage federal contractors could receive a raise, roughly half of the beneficiaries being Black or Hispanic workers. There are an estimated 5 million contract workers in the federal government, according to a posting last year for the Brookings Institute by Paul Light. Wow. He's supposed to be a populist, right? You're helping 390,000 federal workers. They're making a higher wage. And the current minimum wage for the federal workers is $10.95. This is a 37% pay hike. Why is he not supporting that? That's a radical leftist executive order right there. This guy's a fraud, man. He's a fake. You can't believe anything he says whatsoever. He says that they're using rules so they don't need 60 votes to pass legislation. He's referring to budget reconciliation or just reconciliation. He's referring to a standard parliamentary procedure. That's what he's referring to. You know who also used that reconciliation that they wouldn't need 60 votes? Donald Trump in December of 2017 to pass his tax cuts. Yeah, but he's saying they're using rules so they don't need to use 60 votes. The Republicans do it all the time. It's standard procedure. I don't need this. This doesn't need to be elaborated on. This doesn't need to be argued about. Like, it's standard procedure. This guy's insane. Like, I don't know what world these people live in. He says that they're not working with Republicans on any issues of substance. Last time I checked, the PRO Act is incredibly substantive. It'll help workers, it'll help unions, and all the rest. Okay? I mean, there's many other pieces that, look, I'm incredibly critical of Joe Biden because he's a corporatist and a centrist. But, I mean, he has been, like, that administration, they have brought about some, decently progressive legislation here and there, here and there. Okay, we can't give him too much credit because he doesn't deserve it. But what Josh Hawley is saying right here is completely outrageous. He says, this is my favorite quote: "All left-wing politics all the time." What about when he bombed Syria? Leftists are anti-war. We didn't like that. That's not left-wing politics all the time. What about not raising the corporate tax rate to what it was before Donald Trump got to office, which was 35%. Donald Trump cut it to 21%. He wants to bring it to 28%. Joe Manchin and the more conservative Democrats wanted to go to 25%, and that's probably what it'll be. And they'll consider that insanely radical. These people thrive on austerity, and they don't want the people to have anything. There are no populist right-wingers in Washington. Populist my ass. This guy's a complete fraud, and you should never believe a single word that he says. Am I missing anything? And I love how he did. I am missing something. He goes on this rant about how he's radical leftist and left-wing agenda, and they just have to throw in shit that make no sense. They want to cancel women's sports. Like we were gonna miss that one. Oh man, not working with Republicans, he says. Yeah, because Republicans don't want anything except for tax cuts and more money for their donors and endless war. Fuel the war machine. He wants to end the war in Afghanistan. I wonder if Josh Hawley supports him ending the war in Afghanistan. We need to ask him that question. I love how he also says he wants to get rid of your Second Amendment rights. I almost missed that one. You know what Joe Biden proposed for this in regards to gun rights? Universal background checks. Universal background checks when you go to buy. That's it. That's it. He doesn't want to take away your assault weapons or whatever weapon you have, or seize your home and take away your gun, or just ban guns in general. He wants to get rid of your Second Amendment. That's how far they'll go when the Democrats trot out. Let's just do some background checks. Let's just make sure that the people are buying a gun. Let's just verify who's buying them. The only populist stint I've ever seen from this guy is when he got with Bernie Sanders to fight for the $1,200 checks that the people ultimately didn't receive, of course. But other than that, I can't think of anything. I can't think of a single moment where this guy has shown that he's an actual populist, other than advocating for those $1,200 checks. Populist my ass.